SNA officer, and I will be facilitating tonight's session. And my co-facilitator for this evening is Bianca Melendez. And tonight's session is very important and special because we have a lot of our wonderful UCF CCIE faculty members hosting and presenting for you all. So before we get started, just some housekeeping rules. Make sure to keep your mics muted unless instructed otherwise. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, include those in the chat box and we'll address them when time permits. Without further ado, take it away.
Thank you so much, Carla and Bianca, for facilitating as SNEA members our KnightED talks this evening. So as all of you can see on the screen, our title today is Last Stop on Market Street for English Learners. And we're going to talk a little bit about this project that we started, I think around about a year ago. And what you'll see is that we've got multiple presenters, as Carla said, my esteemed colleagues here. We're all going to introduce ourselves, but really important for you to know that we have worked hard together, much like we want you to work hard together on your grade level teams once you become teachers, to put together this streamlined project throughout several of our required courses. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Leanne Spalding, and
I'm Dr. Liz Hoffman, and I teach I'm the course shepherd for LAE 3414, the Literature for Children course, and I teach that alongside Dr. Spalding.
And I'm Carrie Williams. I am instructor for RED 3012 and the other RED courses, 4519 and 4942. And I'm the course shepherd for RED 3012.
Dr. Nuda couldn't be with us today.
Right. And I'm Sharon Roberts. I'm excited to be here. I teach children's literature and language arts methods, and what a joy it is to work with these folks on your screen.
I'm I collaborate a lot with Dr. Nuda via Project MELTS, which many of you have been a part of and are still continuing to be a part of. I actually have had the pleasure to even observe some of you guys in your internship working with English learners. So this is very, very near and dear to my heart. But as the project manager for Project MELTS, I'm collaborating with these fine women here when it comes to all things ESOL, because that's clearly what I'm the most passionate about when it comes to my teaching experiences.
And just so you know, Leslie had a huge hand in developing this guide that we're going to be talking about with you today. She was very instrumental in putting this together.
So Dr. Hoffman and I started talking about how we wanted to streamline our courses a little bit more. We knew that you met Edith Edgar and Taseer, and we're learning about leveled questioning, for example, and what types of strategies you should use in order to enable maximum success for your English learners in your classrooms. And of course, we all know that quality children's literature is so vital to elementary age students, and that just by design, picture books incorporate several English learner compliance strategies that we should be utilizing with all of our students, including our English learners. So this was the beginning of the guide, and you'll notice that the reason the title of the workshop is Last Stop on Market Street is because we chose this particular mentor text. Dr. Hoffman is holding it up. You notice it has three, and Dr. Williams, yes, it has three different awards, and I believe it's even won some more awards than that, but maybe one of the tops there is that gold award. As a picture book, it won the Newbery Award, and that's a little bit different. Over the years, I believe only three picture books have won the Newbery Award. So this tells you that we were very intentional about the selection of this book, and there's a reason why you're going to see this book over and over throughout your program.
So like Dr. Spalding said, she and I were talking, and we realized we, as your faculty, wanted some more information about how to best meet our EL's needs. So then we this is just the beginning of the collaboration. We wanted to give you the big picture. So we brought in Dr. Nuda and Leslie Mendez to help us with the EL pieces. Dr. Spalding and I and Dr. Roberts, we do lots and lots of read alouds. but we wanted more intentional information to share with you all. And we wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page, that what you would hear from us in LAE 3414 would be the same that you'd hear in TSL 4080 and so on. So that's the one we brought in Dr. Nuda and Ms. Mendez. Then we said, how about we take this further across our program? We really wanted to work on collaborating and working together, like Dr. Spalding mentioned earlier. So then we brought in Dr. Williams, who teaches the RED 3012, and we brought in Dr. Roberts, who teaches the language arts, the LAE 4314. So true collaboration on the part of your faculty members to make this come to fruition.
So the first idea was that we knew we wanted to tie this to children's literature, and each of the courses that we'll talk to you about how we've infused this information into these courses, they all have an element of utilizing quality children's literature, either for read aloud or extension in writing activities. So the ramped up read aloud resource that you're seeing on your screen right now, very small in the corner there, you can see 101, and what that's saying is 101 quality children's literature text that they use in this professional resource. All of you that are attending today, please know that our Curriculum Materials Center has wonderful resources for you, and they actually have this professional resource and all 101 of the books that are in the resource to assist you. The reason why they've purchased them is because they would love for you to use this resource with these great books. So here, when you turn inside, there's just a double page spread that provides best practice teaching methods and extension activities related to these particular books. And this particular book was in a section titled Developing Empathy. And I think we all know, especially right now where we are in the midst of this pandemic, that there's a lot of talk of social emotional learning. So I just share this with you because we were very intentional about why we selected this book. And we do recommend that you own this book for your classroom library as well. Just another visual of that screen. Lots of great information in that book. Again, check it out at CMC.
Now I think we're going to have Dr. Roberts give you a little taste of Last Stop on Market Street.
You might be familiar with this really beloved book, and it's won all those awards for great reasons, but I'm not ready to really read it for EL learners today, and that's our focus. But I'm going to give you just a little taste, just a little tidbit, and then we'll move on. Last Stop on Market Street. Last Stop on Market Street. Words by Matt de la Pena. Pictures by Christian Robinson. And there's a lovely fly page. It's dedicated to the grandparents. CJ pushed through the church doors, skipped down the steps. The outside air smelled like freedom, but it also smelled like rain, which freckled CJ's shirt and dripped down his nose. He ducked under his Nana's umbrella, saying, "How come we gotta wait for the bus in all this wet?" "Well, trees get thirsty too," his Nana told him. "Don't you see that big one over there drinking through a straw?" CJ looked for a long time, but he never saw a straw.
Sharon, thank you. I still love being read to. I'm usually the reader, so I absolutely love being read to. And Sharon's sweet Southern drawl makes it even more special. All right, so Dr. Hoffman, I think you're going to go over this part.
Yes. So just to give you a little visual, my mind works in visuals. I love graphics as well as color coding, which you'll see in just a minute. So this just kind of gives you an idea of the courses that are involved, and then the different parts that are in the guide that we are in our courses that we're addressing from the guide. So like I said, LAE 3414, that's the Literature for Children course. And in the guide, it talks about doing the read aloud and then introducing vocabulary. So those are the big pieces that we're going to be covering in our LAE 3414 course. Then we've also got TSL 4080. And in that course, you learn about leveled questions And there's a wonderful resource that I believe Ms. Mendez is going to be talking to you about shortly. So that's the piece that goes into TSL 4080. Then we've got our language arts methods course, our LAE 4314. And Dr. Roberts is going to be talking a little bit more about writing activities after the read aloud to extend the students' experience with the text. And then RED 3012, that's your Foundations of Reading course. That's where Dr. Williams, my man went blank for a minute. Dr. Williams is going to talk about the shared reading piece along with story structure. And there's a wonderful story map. She's got some examples for you. And of course, comprehension, making sure that our students are comprehending the text and some questions to go along with that. So this kind of just gives you a visual of how we're all working together and the different pieces and parts that we're using in the guide in our courses. So this is, like I said, I love color coding. And for it to make sense to me, I suggested, why don't we color code these pieces? And this is actually an excerpt, this one in the next page, from the original guide that we actually, Dr. Williams color coded for us, the different pieces, the different parts for each course. And you can see the green notes that we're going to be doing these activities in both the children's lit course as well as the reading course. So just to give you an idea.
And again, the reason you're seeing some of that over and over again is because we are attempting for depth of knowledge rather than just superficial exposure. We really want you to internalize what you can do in order to effectively teach English learners in your classrooms.
So the overlap was purposeful. We purposefully made sure we had some overlap so you'd see it multiple times.
It's not just double torture.
That's right. No double torture. That's right. All right. So Dr. Hoffman and I both teach LAE 3414. And this was actually when I was at UCF as an undergrad many years ago. Children's Lit was my favorite class. I just adored this class. And it I don't know, ignited the fire once again for teaching and using quality children's literature, and led to an addiction of purchasing many, maybe a couple thousand books. So that being said, one of the strategies that we know you hear about in TSL 4080 that we wanted to reiterate in this course are gap procedures. And in my particular section, and I know that I've got some of the stars of the show coming up, they joined us for this session. So I might call on you, Guido, Samantha, to possibly say a couple of words, but gap procedures are something that we focus on in preparation for our Teach Live Read Aloud. So in my particular section, we use Teach Live, and they put together the lesson plan, and they actually perform the read aloud with our kindergarten avatars. So as a review, or for some of you that are new to this, GAP stands for gesturing, acting out, and pointing. And Guido here, who is also in this session, he chose Gaston as his read aloud book, which I absolutely love. And you see that he's pointing to some of the characters. So he is using part of the GAP procedures to be sure that he is meeting the needs, the diverse needs of his students. Guido, unmute. Did you feel, there you are. Did you feel good about utilizing these GAP procedures while you were teaching the avatars?
Yeah, I felt like it was a really great way to show them stuff, especially the gesturing here. I know there was another part in the story where I talked about like growing, and not only saying that, but definitely just gesturing and motioning that out. You know, you feel that even if the kid, especially English language learners, if they don't understand the words, they definitely can. It makes it so much easier for them to grasp onto it and understand what you're saying, even if they don't know the definitions.
You are absolutely right, and you did it so well, Guido. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
So here, this is what it looked on our side. And Leslie, I know that you're not speaking, more so until the end, but here is where we really highlighted the fact that we wanted to be sure that across the board, our students realized how important it was to gesture, act out, and point. Do you want to reiterate anything that we have here?
Yeah, just take those, support actions as examples and kind of make it your own too. I know that, sometimes gestures and sometimes pointing, sometimes acting out comes naturally. or more naturally in very specific parts of the story. So if I were going down there and trying to do everything for every sentence, it would just totally destroy the story. But just having those, those moments throughout that kind of still flow, and they don't take away from the actual story, but they actually, bring more to it for the English learner, is, the idea behind this. So sure, there's a whole ton of examples on there, but it's really important for you to really familiarize yourself with the story first, to see kind of how those actions, those gestures, all the pointing, because the stories have some wonderful photos that you can actually use and point to, are very important. So just make sure it flows.
And, you really hit on something, a beautiful segue. I think that after the students perform these initial read alouds in LAE 3414 specifically, one of the takeaways is they realize that there's quite a bit of preparation that goes into an effective read aloud. And several of my students said how they really needed to plan. And, we talked about, we don't want it to look corny, but whatever happens naturally, if the ducking while pointing works, or if you happen to have an umbrella in the corner that you can show realia, things like this, that may require some planning. And they definitely knew that. They now realize it can't just be a cold read if you're going to effectively meet the needs of all students. There is definitely planning involved.
A cold read like I was asked.
Yeah.
But I do think I always tell my students, have no pride in doing this. Even if it feels a little awkward, I don't know. I think all of us, for our students, we would fry like bacon on the sidewalk if we thought it would help them learn. And that when I tell myself that gives me permission to go for it.
Yes.
Fry like bacon. I love it.
Bacon.
I would.
You do
right.
fry like bacon.
Yes, frying like bacon. I love it. All right. So notice here, I received permission from my students. And I should say, this was the very first semester. We started planning this last year, but this was the very first semester that we started to implement this across the board. So if you are thinking, I didn't get this in such and such class that you've already taken, that's because we just instituted it this semester. And I know from personal experience that I found the additions to my class, my course, my teaching, I felt that we reaped the rewards when they actually performed the assignment. So these are examples of that. So here we've got Emily, and Emily is using the A in GAP by acting out. And for those of you that are familiar with Hair Love, that also won an Academy Award for the animated short, she is acting out the flip of the hair, acting like a princess. And I am a huge proponent of universal design and also, of course, those English learner strategies. So I just embedded them at the bottom to show you that utilizing these types of strategies in GAP are not only going to meet the needs of English learners, but they're going to meet the needs of some of your students with special needs, and most importantly, help them to comprehend the story. So there she is acting out. Here we have Alex. Alex is using the P in GAP by pointing to the main characters. And here, rather than just aligning universal design and English learner strategies, although they do align, I went ahead and aligned one of your language arts Florida standards. And with prompting and support, students are able to identify characters, setting, and major events in a story. Well, it just makes sense that if you're trying to identify characters, that you would use the P in GAP and consistently throughout your read aloud, point out those characters for students to remember. One of the other elements that we require is the pre-teaching of vocabulary. And what we know with our English learners and our elementary students at large is that an inability to understand some of the high-level vocabulary that authors intentionally include in their stories can hinder comprehension. So we want our students to understand the words in the story. And oftentimes we will pre-teach some of those words and kind of draw out those definitions so that when we get to those terms in the read aloud, they already have prior knowledge. And again, with kindergartners, you know, prompting and support, being able to ask and answer questions about unknown words in a text is a standard that they must be able to complete. So here, and I'll ask Samantha to say a few words, but here Samantha went ahead and she pre-taught some vocabulary with picture word cards, and she held them up, and I think she found a lot of success with using these particular cards. I'll let her talk to you about how she created them and how she felt about how this assisted her in providing an effective read aloud. Samantha?
Yeah, this really helped me and the students because so first, before I started to read, I showed them the vocabulary words. And then whenever I was reading and I came across the word, I like pulled the card back up and I showed them just so, you know, they could remember that we talked about it. And it seemed to really help them with the word, the picture, and then what it means underneath. So I will for sure implement that in the future.
Absolutely. To the benefit of really all of our students, including our English learners. Thank you so much, Samantha.
That's our students up for success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, you know, I mentioned just a little bit earlier, Realia, and we know that that's an English learner strategy. You know, I said if you had an umbrella in the corner, well, Todd, who is also on the call, he took this to a new level. He also chose to read Gaston to the kindergartners, and he had several pieces of Realia available. And I thought particularly this one was really important because not all students actually see a teapot. Todd, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, sure. I was just kind of thinking what would be, you know, fun that I had on hand. So I had teapot and teacups to kind of help show the size difference of Gaston and the puppies.
Absolutely. And that was, I felt that the students responded really well to that. And I think, you know, I've had a lot of students say, you know, how do we continue to engage and motivate children? There's so many distractions. And I think through the use of these gap strategies, through the use of additional Realia, that we can draw students' attention back to our teaching and assist them. So thank you. Thank you to my students who joined us and, you know, off the cuff shared your feedback. Thank you so much.
All right, so TSL 4080, I'm going to try to do Dr. Nuda some justice here and explain, you know, but many of you I'm sure have already gone through everything that's already incorporated into TSL 4080. We have the WIDA levels are super important, and they're a very big focused part of TSL 4080, and it's great that you all are taking this course earlier in your journey to becoming teachers, because what you learn in TSL 4080 really just kind of lends itself to all the other courses and all the other skills that you're all working with throughout the whole, you know, degree and program. So WIDA is basically, Florida is part of the WIDA consortium, and we have levels of English proficiency that our students come to us with. And so you have, those of you familiar with Teach Live, know Edith, you know Edgar, you know Tassir. Those are based off of WIDA levels. So with TSL 4080, they really dive into those levels and what each English learner, depending on their level of English proficiency, is capable of producing language-wise, linguistically, within the classroom, academically, during the school day. And it really goes into every content area too, if you think about it, right? Because if a level 1 is a level 1, it's going to affect them in science and math and reading and everything that's going on, even at PE, right? So basically, if you are able to, and I didn't see it on here, and I don't know if there's a way to kind of get you all the website if you don't have it already. If you want to really dive into WIDA, but also have access to some really great resources, the WIDA website used to be WIDA.us, but they've changed it, and it's now WIDA, W-I-D-A, right there in the PowerPoint, .WISC, and that's short for Wisconsin because it was developed in Wisconsin, or the University of Wisconsin, .edu. And I can get you all that information somehow to give to your students or anybody that's interested in it.
I just put it in the chat, Ms. Mendez.
Okay, wonderful.
It's all
so
good.
you might get overwhelmed. Don't get overwhelmed. Just take it as, you know, you want to learn or dive deeper into something. And, you know, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I love talking all things WIDA and ESOL and how it how teachers can benefit from it. But yeah, so that really dives into the levels. Now, the other thing, and this is kind of like the golden skill of MELTS, for those of you who know MELTS, is all about leveled questioning. And that is the skill that is a center focus for TSL 4080. So dealing with those WIDA levels 1, 3, and 5, Edith, Edgar, and Tasir, how would you be able to build comprehension and really dive into either conversation, find out if they're comprehending the material that you're, you know, just engage in students verbally, and how would you question them? So these are some prime examples. You have the story elements for each page, and it gives you examples of how would I ask a question to a level 1 Edith, you know, on this page, like how would I get her involved in the actual, the reading of it, or afterwards, you know, a follow-up discussion on it kind of thing. And so clearly what you would do for a level 1 is, you know, you'd want to really scale back on your vocabulary use, right? And cut the teacher talk almost completely out, and just use as least amount of words as possible. You know, if you've gotten over 5, you're way too much. So what is this? And then that gap, right? You can go back and refer to a picture and point while you're saying it, or you can act out, you can gesture, what is this? So usually you want them to give you, if they can't answer you, give them like kind of an either or option, right? Or a yes, no response. Then you go up to the middle range, the intermediate English proficiency level, which is Edgar, and you can pull more out of him, right? He might get caught up on, if you were in Edgar's shoes, right? Edgar might be like, well, that's kind of weird. Why would it be in the shoes, you know? So it's that language that you're using that you want to be very careful with. But they are able to really pull from a lot of information that they're learning to kind of expand and give you a lot more than what you would get at a level 1. And then of course the level 5, they're at the very last stage of, you know, the ESOL program generally. And so it's just pushing them to really to pull more critical thinking out of them, right? Like, what do you think the author means when they wrote this? How would you feel? You know, just really dive in there, because they could be very quick to give you just a quick response similar to what Edgar would give you, but we can make them elaborate and, you know, pull way more out of them at that level when you're dealing with questioning and leveling. So leveled questioning means, how do I come to this level of English proficiency and adjust the way that I'm questioning them to get them engaged, to get them participating, and to increase the comprehension of what's going on. So that's really what we've done, and that's what they're doing in 4080 a lot. And you will notice, this is the last slide here, but you will notice that a lot of those questioning skills comes into play with all of the other skills that you're, you know, if you have to speak something at any point in these other skills, you really need to think, was that too much or was that not enough?
Yes. Leslie, I have a real world example from an intern yesterday that I just want to briefly share. So in the hospital, we've got a young lady, she's 7, and she was recently in a car accident and she has a traumatic brain injury. She's also an English learner. And she just started coming in for services with our Peds Academy interns yesterday. And when I performed the observation afterwards, you know, I'm always asking, you know, what's something that you think that you could have changed? And the first thing that came up was I needed to modify the way I was questioning her. And we talked about leveled questioning when it was timely, when it really counted, because she was working with an English learner who also has a cognitive impairment because she was been in a coma for quite some time and just come out. There's so many celebrations to go along with this. So there are a few more facets to it, but she knew immediately that she needed to more so be doing those level 1 questions. And we even talked about, okay, you said it like this. How could you say it to where it would have been better for your learner. And she was immediately able to do that. So these, and I only share this example with you all because this will happen, not the traumatic brain injury part, but working with an English learner one-on-one or in a small group where you'll kind of look at them and think, they're not understanding this. And you're going to have to make those modifications to meet the needs of your student.
That
All
gave
right.
me,
So now we're getting to RED 3012. Dr.
We can go to the next slide.
Wonderful.
Thank you. We're going to talk about picture walk and shared reading, story mapping, but I want to say that as you're thinking about how these fit from all of these different courses, it might be a little overwhelming to think, how do I put all of these together? Do I put these in a certain order? Do I do everything? And I think what's most important is that we're talking about these different tools, and you wouldn't necessarily do all of this with one book, but we're using it as a way to explore how we can talk about this book in all of these different ways. But I think we can also layer this with a book in a classroom. And so some of the things that we might talk about here, we might have done prior to a read aloud. I mean, so just because we're talking about it in this order doesn't necessarily mean that you might do this in your classroom in exactly this order. So one of the things that I use with a variety of levels is a picture walk. And often I will use picture walks with students prior to their reading, prior to their doing guided reading, because they get themselves set up for the language that's in the book by doing the picture walk. And so we walk through the pictures. So I would show them the pictures throughout the book, stopping before the end. I don't want to give away the ending. We'll be talking about the different elements of story, and those have been referred to a little bit earlier, but the elements of the story, like the setting, the characters, the plot, and within the plot, the character's problem, and moving toward the solution to the problem. And I never want to show them the solution of the problem during the picture walk, because I want them to think about that. So we'll do part of the, look at part of the book through the pictures. And what I want them to do is to listen to each other as they are talking about what they see. And this is where some of those questions that Ms. Mendez was talking about would come into play, as we're kind of talking, asking them questions, getting them to look carefully at the details in the pictures. I always want to keep those literary elements in the forefront of our conversation. So at the beginning of the book, and you heard this from Dr. Roberts, at the beginning of the book, you can see the characters coming out of a building. So we would, as a picture walk, I would say, of course, we would start with the cover of the book, but I skipped that. I just wanted to do a little sample. This is like a cooking show, where you just pull little pieces out and then finally get to the, pull the whole thing out of the oven. Anyway, so this is like a cooking show. So I chose these 3 pages that are early in the book to talk about for the picture walk. So we would look at this first picture that's really kind of the beginning of the story. Let's talk about what we see on this page. Usually at the beginning of the story, we learn about the setting, where and when the story takes place. So I want to use those words, even though some of my ESOL students are not going to understand all of the complexities of those terms and concepts. But usually when we are doing a picture walk or read aloud or shared reading, we have a mix of students in our classroom. So we want to make sure that we're not ignoring that terminology, but we also fill in. So if we say setting, we also say where and when. I noticed, and then to the students, I would say, I noticed that the windows are filled with colors. I wonder what kind of building this is. So I want them thinking about what kind of building that might be. And then, so they may volunteer that it's a church. And so I would say, yes, it is a church. If they don't say that, then we can continue to talk about what kinds of buildings might have those colorful windows. And then I could tell them it's a church.
Mhm.
And then we would also say, look at the people. Who do you see? And I want them to notice the people, and especially notice the people on the steps coming out of the church. And then when we go to the next page, and it's actually maybe 2 pages down, but then who do you see on this page who is the same on the first page?
Mhm.
And what is the boy in the yellow shirt doing? And I want them to notice that he's waving, and he's waving to another boy who's in a car who's leaving. So I want them to notice that. And then who's standing next to him? And who do you think is in the car? So if he's waving to someone who's in the car and that person's waving to him, then that might be a friend who is in the car. So now we know some of our characters in the story. Those are the people that are in our story. So again, we're using those literary elements as we talk through pictures. And then I want them to at least get to the part with the bus. So where are the boy and the woman going? Yes, they are getting on a bus. Where do you think they might go next? And so we're beginning to think about plot, although I'm not quite ready to use the word plot yet, but we're going to encounter pictures of the boy that will help us think about the plot. So we would continue through our pictures talking about that and pointing. I want to bring out pointing again. We're going to point to the items in the pictures that we're talking about. So we're making that connection again, especially thinking about the language that we will read later. And before we leave this page, just a quick note. One of the things that I've done with children in doing a picture walk with a whole group, I will take that Post-it tape, it's called Post-it
I
tape,
like that.
and you can cover up the language on the page. So you cover up the words, so they really have to look at the pictures. And I've also gone back and had them dictate what they think the language might be. And then later on, when we read it, we can compare about which words were the same or different. So we're ready for our next slide. So that was a sample of a picture walk. And then after we've gone through a picture walk, we would move into actually reading the story. Now, you've already heard Dr. Roberts read aloud to you. In this case, we're doing shared reading where the students are going to read it with me. And shared reading is often used a lot for reading instruction. If I know several of you are out in schools doing internship now, but when you're in a reading classroom, you'll notice that not often the teachers will have to use that one text with the entire group. And it's difficult when you know that they're all reading at different levels, and it's different to use that book with the entire group. Shared reading is one of those techniques that allows you to keep moving forward, even though they can't all read that story. So shared reading is where everyone is looking at the text at the same time, same text. Teacher is in control, in some cases, in control of what they're seeing, especially if you have it on the document camera. So you can control the print that they see. You can notice that I have my pointer, just like Dr. Spalding has her little cursor with her pointer. But using a pointer, if you're standing at the front of the classroom and you've projected through the document camera, use your pointer as you're pointing at the print and gliding under the print. But if they're holding their own copies of the book, then it's really important to walk around and notice where they are. My preference is to be in control of what they're seeing during shared reading. So I would project this with the document camera. So we start at the beginning of the book in our shared reading, but I skipped over the first few pages because you've already seen those and I want you to see a different page. So I would tell the students to follow along as I read. And then I'm going to read first, and then I'm going to ask you to read it with me. So I would slide my pointer underneath the print, being very careful not to point word by word. I can stop at a word every once in a while, but I don't want them to get in the habit of word by word reading. I want them to hear that in a fluent manner. So listen as I read and follow along as I read. And then I would read, they sat right up front, and I would point under the line as I'm reading. Then the man across the way was tuning A. So again, I'm sliding under, and I pause because I want them to fill in that word. So let's look at that picture and let's think about what we talked about before during our picture walk. And let's guess what that word might be. And depending on what grade level and what strategies we've been working on, they might look at that G at the beginning of the word and think about what he's playing, and let's see if we can fill in that word together. So we do a little bit of reading instruction along the way.
Mhm.
And then let's say it together, guitar. And now let's read that sentence together. So shared reading is about reading together. So we go back and read that sentence. The man across the way was tuning a guitar. Now I will read and you echo. We'll go to the next sentence. I will read it and then I want you to echo. That means you say exactly the same thing I said. An old woman with curlers had butterflies in a jar. And then they would read the same thing. So that would continue. And I just wrote a note at the bottom. Echo reading and choral reading can be very tedious. You don't want to do that exactly like that on every page. So pick and choose the sentences that you would want to do for echo and choral reading. So we would read through most of our story that way. And then we're ready, after we've read our story, then we're ready to think about those literary elements again. And as we're reading our story through shared reading, of course, we talk about those elements. And if Dr. Spalding, could you click on Story Map Jamboard at the bottom for just a minute? And let's just see. And then the first slide in the Jamboard has just the structure of a story map so that they can see the different elements that we're going to focus on in a story map. And we talk about these story elements every single story we read, so they become more and more familiar. So then for this particular story, then we're going to start with the pictures that we've already been talking about. And so we'll pull those pictures, whether we have actual pictures from the book or if we just thumb to those pages in the book, to talk about where do we see where the story takes place. Where do we learn about when it takes place? And we learn, of course, that they're coming out of the church. And then we talk through the who and the problem, the events, and the solution to the story. And finally, talking about theme is a little beyond what we're talking about today, but we can, but we would still bring that in. And then the last slide in the Jamboard, we take the pictures away and we begin to substitute with the words from the story, so that we have our setting, our characters, the basics of the plot with CJ and what CJ's been complaining about, and then as he moves through, beginning to find that sense of joy, beginning to be glad about what they've done together when they got to the soup kitchen. So I won't say more about that. So we would have them retell as much as possible, and partners talking to each other, especially pairing our ESOL students with others so that they can talk to each other, not just in our whole group, but in partners and in small groups. Thank you.
You know, all of that conversation and the walk, the picture walk and the story mapping is a wonderful rehearsal too for the kinds of things they might do if we're thinking about writing extensions. And I really, you know, I was kind of reminded, Dr. Williams, when you said like you don't have to do all this at one time, and you don't. But in some ways, well, listen, I'm a terrible athlete. Like if you know, like playing tennis, I have to remember to like, you know, bend my knees and grip the racket and watch the ball. And I'm supposed to do all that at once. Like forget it. I just panic and do terribly. But you know, being a teacher, really, you're already doing that a little bit. It's a little bit like that. Like you'll get better at this. You'll get better at like, okay, I just naturally bent my knees. I didn't even think about it. I just naturally turned my body this way. I didn't even think about it. And you know, I don't know if you're basketball, you know, March Madness, you're dribbling and doing something else. I can't dribble and do anything else. I can barely dribble. So you'll get more skilled at doing this. And your students too will will kind of come along with you. The thing I love about thinking about EL is there's just, it's not, I'm doing it for my ELs, but really everyone in that class is going to wake up when they see the teapot. Everyone's going to benefit. And that is the beauty of the whole thing. So I really love that. You can go to the next one. But RAFT is a strategy we use for all learners, but I think is especially important for ELs. You really want to know, like, am I just me writing, or am I writing as though I'm running for president, or what's the role of the writer here? And then who is my audience, and what format? Is it a poster? Is it a journal? Is it a letter? Is it an essay? Is it, what is it? And I love that Dr. Williams talked about using that Post-it tape and covering up the words. She had them rehearse it orally, but a very natural next step could be, let's write it, let's retell it. And those picture word cards you had up there, your word bank, we already talked about, the pre-vocabulary. Hey dudes, that's still up there. I can grab that, and that's going to be great for writing, whatever format I'm going to use. And eventually I prefer that my students create their own topics and find a reason to write. Some people call that writing welfare, like it's just a handout. But I think it's okay to have a little jazz that gets them started. So that spells RAFT. That's kind of an easy way to remember it, that whenever you're doing assignments, writing assignments, probably good to remember that. Next. Okay, next.
Do you want me to click on reading rockets or no?
No, just
Okay.
no, thank you though. They can go there though.
Okay.
But there's so many ways we could do this. I think level one, a retelling of the story is just perfect. But if you want to elevate it, if you want to take it a little further in terms of maybe the themes of finding beauty and finding a purpose in your life, perhaps. I know the very first time I read Last Stop on Market Street, I thought, they're going to the soup kitchen. They don't have a car. They're riding the bus. The grandmother's telling them all along the way she points out all the beautiful things. After the rain, there's this great rainbow. And there's a line here I'll read you that says, she smiled. He says, how come it's so dirty over here in our neighborhood? And she smiles and points to the sky. Sometimes, CJ, when you're surrounded by dirt, you're a better witness for what's beautiful. And, you can take a line like that and see what they might want to write. I would prefer to start there, but I wanted to give you guys some ideas. I think it's cool to brainstorm, write down some different choices of writing activities, and depending on their level or their motivation, you might get more or less. I will tell you, I've been very shocked. I can think of one little EL in particular I did not think capable of writing a letter. I thought they'll pick the poster option I'm giving. They'll do the drawing with some captions. And they did it. They were very motivated. So brainstorm and provide several choices of writing. A great thing to think about, I don't know if Matt De La Pena has thought about it, but we've written some great sequels to Last Stop on Market Street. It sounds very final, Last Stop, but there could be another go round. And so I wonder if a little boy might engage a friend and decide to do something else. Maybe they'll do their own version of a can collection. Maybe they'll start a garden at their school. Maybe the church will get involved. So who knows? So you can introduce some examples and materials for children to consider different formats of writing. I really think most children, EL or otherwise, sadly, think of writing as just one thing, answering a doggone question in complete sentences. So, and it really doesn't relate to their life so much. So maybe they're going to make posters or flyers, and maybe there's a real reason. Maybe they really will have a food drive or a can drive. just in their classroom. Doesn't have to be giant, doesn't have to give all the moms and dads and guardians a headache, but something that they feel a part of their community and enacting. It could be chalk messages on the school, at the church, in their neighborhoods, that they just kind of make a pledge. I'm going to write a chalk message, and maybe their parent will take a picture of it or something. Something authentic, really. There's a lot of research that shows when kids write authentic things like thank you notes to the guy that came and showed them the fire truck, their spelling increases, their handwriting is better, they make more sense, shockingly. So I think these are kind of exciting. So maybe they're going to write letters to solicit donations or volunteers. Boy, those are big words. I don't know, but they could say like, dear Mr. Neighbor, do you have any extra cans? You know, so we're going to do, maybe it even leads them to find the beauty and the things to be thankful for in their own life. So maybe a very simple, my friends keep a gratitude journal, a diary, something like that, and to allow children to explore that. And there's a lot of supports and examples that you can give them next. And then you can, my word bank is pitiful here compared to my colleagues early on, but you've still got that word bank or that anchor chart up with all those words. If it were me in the classroom, I'm kind of a halfway decent artist. I'd probably say, what words do you want to use? And I'd write them on the anchor chart. And then I'd doodle a picture of a bus or a soup can or something to remind us. And I'd have them do that in their writing notebook, the words that they need. Maybe they have a personalized spelling dictionary and they're going to put some of these words in there. And then of course, sentence frames. You're going to be doing some MELTS modules if you haven't already as part of 4314 that really do a great job of providing that scaffolding questioning and the sentence frames. I just put a few here, but depending on what the format of the writing is and your role as a writer. So I hope that will give you some ideas. Really, any book. We could take any book and do all these wonderful things. Some of them will require a lot of planning. Some of them you can do a little on the fly once you're cognizant of the things to do, like duck under the umbrella or freckles on his nose. So I hope that helps.
All right, so it's 5:25. We did really well with our time. We really felt compelled to put together this project again to show not only collaboration, but for you to realize how important it is to meet the needs of your English learners in the classroom, and how while you're meeting those needs, there will be a ripple effect of benefits that will occur. And we know that it's so important and crucial for you to plan intentionally for the needs of your English learners. I added a little picture with the whole body listening. That was something that came up in my course as we were discussing read aloud, and important to have our students ready to listen and ready to engage in all of these wonderful activities and to set those expectations for them. So we've got 4 minutes. Questions? Any questions that you all might have?
Or maybe you guys have experienced doing some of these things and you might speak up and tell us what worked or what were some challenges or some bumps that you hit you didn't anticipate.
Be bold,
I guess
be
I can
brave.
speak.
Oh, good,
sorry.
Todd, good.
I can speak to that. Just kind of going off of the idea about not having to do every single one of these things, but using it as more of a toolbox. I think as much as we plan sometimes, the students can throw us off. So I found when we did our read aloud, I had some things planned in my head, but then natural conversation or questions from the students just sparked something. And sometimes much better than I had even planned, because the students are so bright and they come up with something brilliant. So, being flexible like that, I think is really important. So I loved that point that you had talked about in the presentation.
You're absolutely right, Todd. So many of you really act on the teachable moment, and you run with it. And oftentimes those best laid plans take, you know, a little bit of a, you know, just a little sideward turn, and it actually makes it better.
I could also speak on the importance of the vocabulary. I remember that I was doing the melts, and I never thought of it before, but in one of the melts videos, the teacher was like, "Oh, this is a city, or have you ever had a CD?" And she's like, "Yeah, I've been to cities. I went to Miami. I went to Orlando." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, CD, city." And with her accent, it sounds like she's saying CD. And I never would have thought that that would be a connection. And I actually experienced it in my internship. When I had one of my students, I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And she was like, "No, it's hot." And I was like, "Oh." So I went and I explained what I meant when I said that's cool. So the vocabulary is definitely important.
That's cute.
Can I just say that Bianca also allowed me to come and observe her in action with some English learners, and she did a fantastic job incorporating all of these skills.
It's very rare for you to end up in a classroom during internship that doesn't have English learners. More often than not, you are going to be practicing these skills. And much like Todd said, we want to provide a lot of tools in the toolbox. We most certainly don't want you to feel overwhelmed, but we also want you to feel prepared and understand that in order to effectively meet their needs, that there are best practice strategies that you need to implement, not all at the same time, but as it makes sense. And to speak to what Dr. Roberts said so beautifully, you're not going to get it all right at this, you know, right at the beginning. This is a process. You're going to grow and learn in all of this. And I think Leslie would agree that not all English learners are the same. Something that works really well with one, you'll think, "I've got this down." And then the next minute, "Yeah, no, I don't." Because something that you tried with one just doesn't necessarily work, right? All students have special needs in a sense, and we just have to take the time to get to know what they are so that we can meet them where they are and provide the best possible educational opportunities for them. Victoria, my internship does not have ELL, but 6 students are on target or above. I'm looking at your, she uses EL strategies with her students, right?
Yeah. I was going to say, you really can't go wrong. I don't think I've ever gone wrong using Realia or Gap or whatever. How could it go wrong to try any of those? I mean, it really can't. It's really engaging, and it just brightens the day, your day.
It does. It does. And I must say that working with such amazing colleagues as you have witnessed here today is one of the reasons that I've been at UCF so long. We have quite a crew of faculty members that genuinely want to help you become the best possible teachers that you can be. And that's why they are providing these types of workshops for you and working hard behind the scenes to make sure that we're staying up to date with the information we're providing you so that you can go out and do the best possible job as novice teachers as you begin. So that being said, it's 5:30 and we want to honor your time. And we thank all of you so much for being here and taking an interest in KnightED Talks. And we appreciate you all attending. And on Saturday, we have the KnightED Talk Student Showcase 10 to 2. We'd love to see you support your peers. Miss Carla and Victoria here are both going to be presenting. Let's support them. It won't be faculty members. It'll be you sharing your wonderful knowledge. So thank you all so much for attending. Have a good evening.
Thank you, guys.